Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Thursday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day to those of you observing, either with your favorite beverages or, corned beef and cabbage or shepherd's pie or bangers and mashed, or if you're just eating tacos today. There's never a bad time to eat tacos. Whatever you're doing.
Well, I don't know about Irish tacos.
What would an Irish taco be? Would it be the corned beef and cabbage in a tortilla?
Well, you know what? I would actually maybe eat that.
I'll try it.
I'll try a corned beef taco.
You probably have to go flour tortillas with that. Corn would taste a little weird with corned beef, which is kind of strange because you'd think.
That's why they had a bunch of corned beef out when I was shopping on the weekend. I actually had some.
I do like the seasonal.
I think we might have some vegetarians over tonight for dinner, though, so I don't think I'm going to be making it.
Yeah, I do have to go to the grocery store when we're done. So maybe I'll go Google how to make corned beef and cabbage and find out it takes like all day and I won't have time to do it.
Yeah, right.
Also, haven't seen an Irish restaurant since I moved here. Not that there are Irish restaurants most places.
Irish restaurant.
I haven't seen an Irish pub, though, either, that would have those kinds of foods. So there you go. A lot has happened in the last few days. We just had a 3-0 show drop overnight Wednesday into Thursday. So we talked about some of the real life implications. So be sure to check that out on our YouTube page or in the Athletic Baseball Show feed. From a fantasy perspective, tons of stuff to talk about. We have more moves. We have more injury updates. We have some minor additions as well that could have a fantasy impact. So we're going to begin with the biggest move of all, at least in terms of a great team getting better, and one we didn't get a chance to talk about yesterday because it hadn't happened yet. Freddie Freeman to the Dodgers. It is a thing. And yes, the Dodgers have maybe the best projected lineup I have seen as an adult baseball analyst. Like I can't recall looking at a lineup top to bottom with as much talent in it as what the Dodgers have. I thought when the Dodgers were first linked to Freeman, I thought it was more of a play from the inside from Freeman's camp just to drum up more interest and to create more of a bidding war. And here we are. The rich get richer. Freddie Freeman is, in fact, a Dodger.
It's a little bit, just from a real life perspective, it's a little bit sad, because I feel like if this was the price, I feel like maybe the Braves should have paid it.
Yeah.
But, maybe it wasn't the price that the Braves saw, Maybe this is the result of the Braves pulling out of the race. We don't really know the machinations behind there. But, yeah, the Dodgers are now projected to score 5.24 runs a game. That's almost a quarter run higher than the second, which is the Blue Jays. They're projected to win 106. No, that's last year. They're projected to win 96 games, but that's still wicked high because projections don't normally project anybody for 100 wins, and they're almost there.
I could look at this team and tell myself a story that they could be kind of like the 72-10 Bulls of the 90s. They could win 125 games or something absurd.
Ooh, the Mariners.
They could pull something record like that. Yeah, they could make a run at that. And it'd be pretty fun to watch to see if they can pull it off.
Maybe a little bit of a soft underbelly in the back end of the rotation with Kershaw, Gonsolin, Haney, Bauer, and Price. You kind of need some things to go right there, They could be running out, a bunch of Andre Jackson that they hadn't been planning on. But otherwise,
we know they can go get more, and they've got prospects coming up too.
It's true. It's true. I like Mitch White, and Dustin May comes back at some point, and that's a pretty good duo to have in your back pocket. Who loses out of this? I figure especially with his elbow injury, Muncy's the DH, Freeman's the first baseman, Taylor gets his time between center and second, or center, left, and second. And he's still about do you think Taylor loses out on this? I guess Gavin Lux loses the most out of this.
Gavin Lux looks like the biggest loser of all of this, but I guess the way this team is built, their bench right now, based on what roster resource has, and this certainly lines up with how I think their bench would work, is Austin Barnes, Hanser Alberto, Matt Beatty, and Gavin Lux. Of those four players, one of those four is not like the others. Gavin Lux is the one that has quite a bit of ceiling still.
More of
And
the
if
super sub.
and if anybody gets hurt, there's enough versatility somewhere. If Lux can't play that spot himself, other than like a Will Smith injury, they're going to shuffle things around, and Lux is going to play more. So
Right. Yeah. If Trey Turner gets hurt, Lux plays there. If Taylor gets hurt, Lux turns into the jack of all trades, but also maybe the starting second baseman. Justin Turner gets hurt. Probably Chris Taylor plays over there, a little bit better arm, and Lux plays second. If anybody in the outfield gets hurt, Lux plays second, and Taylor plays that outfield position. So,
yeah, it makes it harder to use Gavin Lux in your lineups, especially in a 12-team league. Maybe it makes him borderline undraftable in 12-team redraft leagues for right now. And for
oh yeah, it makes it
15-teamers,
tough.
maybe he's more of a bench guy. But you also look at this team, if you're picking nits in it, it's older in the core because Max Muncy, aside from that elbow injury, he's on the wrong side of 30. Justin Turner, well past the wrong side of 30. AJ Pollock, Freddie Freeman himself doesn't need a lot of days off, but maybe part of the strategy here is saying, hey, we've got this super team. Let's just keep everybody healthy. Let's make sure we're getting guys regular rest. Let's make sure
Yeah.
Mookie Betts' hip doesn't become a problem again.
That's
maybe just playing everybody a little bit less is also part of their plan.
I think that's 100% the plan. Load management. One of the things that we talk about, here up in San Francisco is that there is a director of health sciences or something. Basically, a person in the Giants that is tasked with keeping everybody healthy, who has a PhD and an extensive background and knows all the research. So that's the idea that I'm sure that the Dodgers have something like that, where there's just somebody who's tasked with monitoring all their sort of health stats, what they can get. They turn on all the tracking systems during batting practice in most parks now. So you can actually start to see some things in batting practice and say, "Ooh, wait a second, that was a little bit weird looking. We're gonna sit Justin Turner today." And Justin Turner will be like, I don't even know what you're talking about, but they're like, no, we saw something. So, I would downgrade the plate appearances for almost everybody on the Dodgers. And it does make it a little bit harder in 12 teams. In 15 teams, I think most of these players are just so good that you're just willing to take the chance and, maybe take a few, you won't get the Semien 700 plate appearances, but you're hoping you get 600. And the last thing that occurs to me when I'm looking at this is it's like an ideal draft and hold roster, right? We talk about how you want to go like 2 or 3 deep at every position in a draft and hold team. And now that I look at it, I'm like, wow, the Dodgers go 3 deep at every position.
Yeah, that's been a signature of them for a while, but just playing on a stage of their own, really, with the way they've built this roster. And it's a 6-year deal for Freddie Freeman. I think that was probably the issue with Atlanta, not necessarily the money that Freeman got as a result of
So,
this
yeah, a
deal.
6-year deal to a 32-year-old. There's going to be some issues maybe on the back end of that, but there's nothing really in Freeman's profile that suggests that he's aging yet. I mean, if you look at it, the last 2 years were his best years for swinging strike rate and his best 2 years for strikeout rate. His 2 best years for reach rate, even, it's and among his best years for barrel rate. So it's just seems to be aging really well. Even, last year was his second best year for stolen bases, which is, not the best metric, but it's still tells you he's moving well. Hasn't turned into Pujols yet,
Oh, I think he's going to age much more like Votto than a Pujols or Miggy type. The body types are different. The athleticism is different, as we've seen what Freeman's done in his early 30s. So yeah, I think relatively speaking, yes, typically a first baseman going through his mid and late 30s would scare you, but I think this is about as safe of a profile as you can find in a player that plays that position.
I don't think the Dodgers probably wanted the sixth year, and they are more about higher AAV and shorter deals. However, this does maybe help them at some point in the next 6 years when it comes to the luxury tax, because it does even it out as opposed to put it all in 1 year.
Good point. Let's stay in the NL West, where the bulk of the activity was on Wednesday. Let's talk about Kris Bryant going to the Rockies, which was
spicy,
very strange in the bigger picture. It's our friend Paul Sporer said, I like this more than most things the Rockies do, which I think is fair. And I know I kind of had the immediate reaction of dunking on it on the 3-0 show, and I still don't like it in the sense that they don't seem like they're going anywhere right now. They're still projected to tie for 4th in the division with...
No, it's even worse than that. They
Worse?
were projected to be the worst team in baseball, and with the signing, they are 1 win better than the Orioles.
They're 1 win better than the Orioles. Okay, because I was looking at the Fangraphs projected standings, and they had them probably about tied with Arizona, depending on how you projected Bryant, which it looked good for Kris Bryant. I'll say it again. Awesome.
Well, what were
That's
you
where he wanted to
using? Were you
go.
using the WAR? Or I'm looking at the projected standings right now.
I was just doing an estimate of extra wins because of Bryant based on expected WAR
Oh,
and
but
where
I
they were
think
projected.
I think he's in there. Oh, with WAR. Okay, all right, yeah.
But the real stuff aside, and yeah, 7 years, 182 million after you paid St. Louis to take Nolan
good
Arenado
Lord.
and took back a return that people have been very skeptical of. It's just strange in that context. Bryant going to Colorado stabilizes his short-term value in a way that no other place really would have. He does have to deal with the difficulties of going in and out of Coors Field and pitches reacting differently, all the things we see hitters deal with. But I think this gives us a few more years of Bryant being an easy 30-plus home run guy with great run production and probably even a good batting average thanks to his new home park. It's just kind of like, well, probably not going to see Kris Bryant playing in October very often on this deal. But for fantasy purposes, this jumps him up maybe into the top 50, top 60 overall. And he was a guy that was previously going 20 to 30 picks later than that.
I am interested to see if he loses his third base eligibility this year. Ryan McMahon is a pretty good third baseman. He's young. He feels a need there. In left field, Bryant would be replacing Connor Joe, most likely. Kind of assuming that Tapia can handle center. He's not an ideal center fielder, but maybe with Bryant and Blackman next to him, it's like everybody's okay out there. I just right now in Fangraphs, Sam Hilliard is the lead center fielder, and I think the Rockies have had a million chances to give Sam Hilliard a job, and this doesn't seem like the time that they will finally do it. So my guess is it goes Bryant, Tapia, Blackman in the outfield. Connor Joe gets some time at first and DH, and as fourth outfielder, maybe Hilliard's in that mix as well. And then across the infield, it's McMahon, Iglesias, Rogers, Crone. It's still not a very good team, and they signed a closer and a bat, and were one of the worst teams before that. So it's not enough. Like, look at all the things. The Rangers were one of the worst teams last year. Look at all the stuff they've done, and now they're maybe like an average team.
Right. I think it takes
and then
that
compare
kind of
how much how much the Rockies have done.
It also
comparatively.
It's also hard, aside from all the issues we've talked about on this show over the years, like playing in Colorado presents. It's a very difficult place to win. Maybe the most difficult place in Major League Baseball to build a consistently good team. I can fully admit that. I think it's extra difficult when you're dealing with the Dodgers doing what they're doing right now and always being the Dodgers, the Giants being better than expected, having some young talent that's not far away, and San Diego being willing to spend as a big market team, right? That creates an uphill battle in the NL West. That's not totally unlike what we see for a team like Baltimore in the AL East. So I just think with Colorado, it's going to be how much can they find their own path? How much are they doing behind the scenes to find ways to build a team that actually translates as well as a team can translate in and outside their park? So if they do more, great. I hope they do more and they can maybe pull their version of what Texas is doing. It's funny, those two teams in my mind are always very similar because I can never quite figure out their direction. If Colorado comes out and adds Michael Conforto also this offseason and they put him in a corner, great. That sounds like a significant upgrade.
And then they've got like 5 corner outfielders and no center fielder.
Yeah, it's like, so like, what are you going to do?
But that's okay. Actually, of anything, if anything, I would, if there was any idea I would give the Rockies, it might be Murderer's Row. Just put a bunch of sluggers out there.
Try to score 8 runs a game at home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one way to go around it, but I'm in on Bryant at an increased price. I just think we know enough about the park, how it plays, his core skills. It really comes down to his shoulder. If he's healthy, he's going to return value as a top 50, top 60 overall guy.
I'm not sure I'm in on Bryant in keeper leagues. Like, oh, this is the time, because I think his sale price went up, and there is the chance he loses third base eligibility.
I think it's kind of a great selling opportunity. And if you have him in a keeper or a dynasty league right now, like this is a great time to see what you can get for him. Even if you like him for this season and next season, it's still the kind of profile that's relatively easy to find in long-term leagues. There's not a lot of speed there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Move him now while you can, because I think it's a relative high point in his value going forward. More moves. Seiya Suzuki has a team. He lands in Chicago with the Cubs. It looked like when we signed up on Monday, there was a chance he was going to San Diego, but
Yeah,
the Padres get swooped again. Seiya Suzuki gets 5 years from the Cubs. $80 million, I believe, was the final dollar figure that I saw. What are we getting here? Because from a fantasy perspective to this point, he's been kind of a fringy top 200 overall guy in terms of his ADP, knowing that he's got a contract and where he's going to play. I expect that to jump probably 50 plus picks. But how do you think the skills are going to translate in his first season in the big leagues?
He's lost a step or two. So I guess the question mark is there is a question mark on steals. He used to be kind of a high steals guy. Then he was kind of like 7 to 8 steals for a couple of years in the last couple of years in Japan. So you may come over and just steal 5 to 6 bags. Although the power, the plate control, the defense, those should all be good. So he should be the starter in one of the corner outfields. I think, he's a guy who struck out 16% of the time and walked 14% of the time in Japan. So I expect that strikeout rate to go up, but I'm, hoping is the maybe a wrong word, but I believe he could keep it on the right side of league average. League average is 21%. So, I'm thinking maybe he strikes out like 20% of the time, walks 12% of the time, and has a 280 average with like a 350 OBP and 25 homers and 5 steals. That's the kind of player I think he is.
Yeah, I'm looking at projections right now. I know ATC has a projection up for Suzuki: 266, 359, 476 for the slash line. It's a 126 WRC plus. That puts him kind of in the Justin Turner, Manny Machado, Giancarlo Stanton range of real life value, but those are all very different fantasy players. I think in terms of low 20s homers and high single digit speed, that kind of looks more like, geez, this version of Christian Yelich actually is what Seiya Suzuki looks like on paper.
Yeah, that's not bad. There's a weird thing going on where the Zips depth chart projection doesn't match an article that Dan Szymborski wrote, in which he had a much closer, he had basically the ATC projection, something like that. I'm thinking that the average is a little bit low there, but that matches a lot of what I was saying. Also, I don't know why you would give him 500 plate appearances on this Cubs team,
Oh, he's got to play
Yeah.
nearly every, almost a max volume player should be. If he's not in the heart of the order, he's probably like a 2-hitter, right? I mean, like, with those plate skills, I would think he's
exactly
either high in the order or heart of the order.
Yeah, I think he's a 2-3 hitter. So it's a little bit rough on one of my favorite sleepers, Clint Frazier. I still think that with DH in the NL and the age, I don't know if people realized how old all the players that the Cubs found last year were. Rafael Ortega is 30. Patrick Wisdom is 30. Frank Schwindel is 29. So there's a collapse percentage on all 3 of those guys. So I could see a lineup that has Frazier in left, Happ in center, Suzuki in right. And Ortega and Hayward are the kind of 4th and 5th outfielders. There's also an interesting thing going on in the infield where they signed an old person. Simmons is 32 now, Anderson Simmons, and they just signed Jonathan Villar. So this is a crowded, I guess they're trying to mimic in some ways the Dodgers lineup where, hey, we've got guys who can play everywhere, but picking the winners is going to be tough. I've always had a soft spot for Nico Horner, but there's almost zero power that he's demonstrated so far. So I guess Nico Horner is the backup middle infielder. and VR and Wisdom are basically battling for third? Or are they going to go Wisdom, Simmons, VR, and Madrigal and Horner? They're just like, hey, you gotta fight your way onto this.
I don't think so. I think Patrick Wisdom was a 40% K rate last year. That's not going to stick. If he comes in and cuts that a lot, maybe he hangs around, but I could see him getting bounced off the roster. I think options are kind of key when you look at how the Cubs playing time is going to shake out, right? I mean, Rafael Ortega came up last year and surprised late in the year. He's probably a seat warmer placeholder for Brennan Davis. At some point this year, we might see Davis.
Gotta come up, yeah.
No options left for Ortega, so he has to stay on the roster.
Madrigal has one option left.
Madrigal's got options. Wisdom, I believe, has options. Nico Horner has options. Guys like Harold Ramirez, he doesn't have one.
No, he's done.
So you got a few guys like that probably hang around at least the beginning of the season.
But they have too many outfielders. Someone's going to lose in that outfield. Someone's like, I mean, I guess Harold Ramirez doesn't make this team. Or they just cut Jason Hayward. Is that possible?
I don't think that's going to happen.
He's not a free agent till 2024. And, he still has some defensive value. But last year, I mean, he played 104 games and is basically replacement level.
I think this is bad for Clint Frazier. That's the clearest indicator to me of like a player who's losing something right now because of the resulting crunch from Suzuki landing.
And bad for Madrigal and Horner. One of them could end up, or both of them could end up with the minors. The only thing that helps them is that their weakest place is up the middle. Even if you go Simmons VR, one of those guys needs to make the team to back up Simmons and VR.
Madrigal shouldn't go down, though. Madrigal, for his brief big league career, it's only about a half season so far, sitting 317 with a 358 OBP. He's a good defender at second. Like you're playing that guy. Like there's no way they would just send him down. I don't know, like who's playing second base if they send Madrigal down?
VR.
They wouldn't do that for VR. But the Cubs are quietly making those improvements. We wondered what was going to happen when they added Marcus Stroman, because that did not make sense in isolation. They did get an impact bat with Suzuki. And if the ADP jumps up into the 125 range for Suzuki, later than Yelich and Bellinger and some of those guys,
I think I'm still in, because I think the upside there is, what if more power translates? He hit 38 homers in Japan last year. So, the projection of 22 to 25 is like, I mean, it could be 30.
Yeah, it's an interesting profile. There's lots of ways for Suzuki to make value, but that price, it's gone. The early draft season price is absolutely over.
A team executive told me he thought this deal was the best deal of the offseason and that Suzuki was a monster, quote unquote.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, look, I could see him being an impact guy for a while too.
Yeah.
Let's get to a trade. Matt Chapman goes to the Jays, part of the A's demolition that's happening to that roster right now. And we'll get to the return in just a moment. But Chapman to Toronto, just like Matt Olson, it's an upgrade in terms of home run park factors. The Rogers Center 3-year rolling average for home runs is 115. The park in Oakland Coliseum, is an 82 park factor. So a big improvement there. We've talked about the flaws. Struggles with the high fastball are a big part of Matt Chapman's elevated K rate. Was coming off of hip surgery last season as well. We know we're getting great defense and probably a very high volume of playing time. And now he's got a great supporting cast around him. Even if he's the same guy skills-wise that he was a year ago, he's probably going to post significantly better numbers just by virtue of the park upgrade and the lineup upgrade around him.
Yeah, also that specific thing he was dealing with, the high fastball, it's just so weird for me that he hasn't found a solution when his two of his closest friends, colleagues, Marcus Semien and Matt Olson, in the last 2 years have figured out high fastballs, and it's been a big part of their explosion. So there's like a part of me that's like, yo, those two guys figured it out, man. And he talks to them. He texts them. Like, if he figures it out, like, we could be talking about like 260, 38 homers type guy.
Yeah. Yeah. The 18 and 19 numbers from Matt Chapman are very good. We saw average and good OBP in 18. We
Like
saw
he has that
even
in him.
36 homers in the year of the Rabbit Ball. It's absolutely there. The StatCast numbers are still good. I liked him a lot where he was going this draft season. Of course, this upgrade is going to bring the price up. If he's going kind of in that 140, 150 overall range, I'm still in. I just think there's likely a high volume of playing time in a great spot. I think I'm well over all the projections. The most optimistic projection is the Zips at 230. I think he's over that. I think he's more of a 240 guy. I think 30 home runs with ease, and I'd take the over on 80 runs
The
and 80
counting
RBIs
stats.
too.
Yeah. Interesting thing going on here. When he was at his best, he had a 40% fly ball rate in those 2 years. And then in the last 2 years, it's jumped over 50%. And we've talked about on this podcast about 50% fly balls being a little bit of a marker for a potential hole up in the zone. If you look at guys who have a 50% fly ball rate, you'll see a lot of really low batting averages and high strikeout rates. And my theory, which is founded in science, is that they've built a swing to lift the low ball. And that's why they can have these high fly ball rates. They've got a very steep vertical attack angle. And there are some people out there who think vertical attack angle is the number one most important thing about batters. And I disagree. I think it's bat speed, which he also has. But I also think that extreme vertical angles produce lines like he's got. And if you look at guys like Schwarber, Bellinger, other guys in the past, they've developed a second type of swing, a B swing, a C swing, a way to do something on the high fastball. And for Simeon, it was hit the top half of the ball on four seamers, and that's led to an explosion in his power stats. And for Olsen, it was he found a little red pitching machine that could simulate four seam rise really well, and he got better. He got a lot better at four seamers in the top of the zone. That's a big part of his strikeout rate going down. So, I think that. Like, don't you think Chapman is trying hit the top of the ball off of the little red machine like right now? So I'm hoping that training methods lead to something. And worst case scenario, where you're buying him, I think you're buying a 230 hitter with a bunch of power.
Yeah.
So
yeah, if you're taking
an
on
even better buy now.
You're taking on some known average risk. I think compared to some of the catchers we talked about in the catcher preview, you're getting it over a much larger volume of playing time. So it's a heavier weight if the average doesn't come back. So you have to at least account for that a little bit as
a little bit more
take advantage of it.
Potential for improvement. You know, a lot of these catchers are not going to improve their batting average.
I look back at the O swings and the K rates we saw a couple of years ago, 21.9% in the year of the Rabbit Ball, 23.7% K rate the year before.
His reach rate's never been bad.
Yeah.
It's just a whole like inside the zone high, you know?
I just can't imagine that is something that the Jays are unable to fix. Now,
exactly.
The return, Kevin Smith, who I think we talked about on this show at some point in the last few weeks.
He goes best prospect the A's got in all this, and he's got some serious flaws.
He's got flaws, but he made a swing change and put together a nice season in AAA. Does all the things that we want from a fantasy perspective. He showed the ability to hit for average, showed power, was an efficient
50% fly ball rate. Not every year. His best year in AA.
But a 144.
That wasn't his best year. That was his worst year. So he kind of came up off that. Maybe he learned that lesson.
A 144 WRC plus, a good result for him at AAA last year. Obviously can play a ton in Oakland. There's jobs available pretty much at every position right now.
You know what I would care about in spring training for Kevin Smith? His strikeout rate. People like to say that nothing matters in spring training, but strikeout rate is something that becomes stable pretty quickly. And 2 to 3 weeks of strikeout rate does have signal in it. So if you can follow along, I mean, he is the type of guy that you may not even be like, let's say you've drafted, he may not be available until you do your first fab run, right? And so a lot of people may not be looking at him because his projections are for like a 220 average or whatever, right? And so he may be ignored in some fab runs, or you might be able to pick him up for single digits. And the time that I would, if he was striking out 25% this spring, I would put $1 on him or a few dollars on him, even in a 15-team league, because then you have the chance of buying a guy with a 250 average and power and speed.
The pitchers going to Oakland, Gunnar Hoagland first rounder recovering from Tommy John surgery.
They
Could
got
easily
an
be an
injured
impact
guy.
guy. They got an injured. They've
Cannot
done this
believe it.
before.
Yeah.
They do this a lot. They trade for injured prospects and hope to catch lightning in a bottle. I mean, they did a few years ago. James Caprillion was hurt when they acquired him.
That's right.
That deal from the Yankees. So there's talent there. It's just
I
a
thought he
question
would
of getting
never
him
get
back.
healthy again.
Yeah, and that situation I think was a little more up in
Dicey,
the air
yeah,
than Hoagland's. So he could be an impact guy later on. The other two pitchers, though, Kirby Snead is a 27-year-old left-handed reliever, probably a guy they're going to throw in that bullpen right away because they need innings. And then Zach Logue, a starter that I think did see just he didn't debut. Snead debuted last year, but looks like a big league ready, at least back end sort of starter.
They must have changed something about him. In 2019, he had 7 K9, and that's sort of what he'd been doing for a while. And then when he came back out of COVID, he had a 15 and 12% swinging strike rate. So I think he must have spent 2020 shaping his pitches and came out with something different.
Yeah, the pitch grades are really good on the changeup, decent on a cutter, and he's got above average command. So I think Logue could surprise us. I mean, you have to look at every opportunity in Oakland right now and try and convince yourself that it could go right just because it's an opportunity without a lot of competition. And if you have a guy that was stuck in Toronto and wasn't going to play, he would have been a little bit buried in prospect rankings. I'm not trying to defend what the A's are doing, but they went the quantity route, and some of these guys are going to play right away.
Right, and I think it's easier to assess what's happening on the hitting side than it is necessarily on the pitching side because we just keep hearing rumors about Minaya and Montas. And if those guys, Minaya and Montas, are gone, then Logue might be in the rotation. You know, I wouldn't be buying Dalton Jeffries. Caprillion is not one of my favorites. Irvin is like a good play at home guy. It would be a pretty bad rotation according to my model and to my opinion. But they have, made some strides in their pitching development, and I could see them, somebody popping. Maybe Logue is that guy.
Yeah,
he could start in the rotation, huh?
It's possible, even if they keep Minaya and Montas for now, that Logue gets a spot in there. I don't think Paul
Dalton Jeffries has like and Dalton Jeffries has like a 60 stuff plus.
Yeah, Jeffries still has options left too for whatever that's worth. I mean, they added Brent Honeywell. They're trying to stretch him out. AJ Puck's being stretched out right now. It's just it's a scene.
It's a mess.
It's a scene in A's camp.
I'm still happy I got Chad Pinder. He's not listed at the starter, but in deep leagues, I have to think that he's going to play a fair amount somewhere. Eric Thames is the favorite for the DH job there right now, but he's a non-roster invitation. So I could see Pinder playing at first and Brown DHing, or Pinder is just an often playing fourth outfielder that also plays on the infield.
I think we'll have a handful of A's that end up playing a ton that become early season waiver pickups that are difference makers. And I think Kevin Smith is on that list. Pinder could be on that list.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, Billy McKinney was added. I mean, there's just a bunch of guys that have been bouncing around the league on and off rosters, struggling to actually hold even a share of a job that now might just have 500 plate appearances in front of them if they can.
Pache's
early on.
Pache's spring training strikeout rate also interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. More to come on the A's, I'm sure, as they possibly add a few more players in the weeks ahead. This other trade, I don't really understand what the Reds are doing. Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suárez were flipped to the Mariners. Without even getting into the return going back the other way, I do think from a fantasy perspective, this is bad for my Jesse Winker as an MVP candidate bid because he's losing park factors here. I mean, Suárez is too. Great American Ballpark.
It's not home runs so much. It's the other stuff.
Right. Well, it's a little bit of both, but
yeah,
Great American Ballpark has the best home run park factor looking at the last 3 years, a 130 overall mark, right? And Seattle T-Mobile Park is close to neutral at 98. So you do have to shave off home runs from both of these players. What do you make of them, though, being in a situation now that actually is becoming a more balanced lineup in Seattle? I think we looked at it maybe 2 months ago, and it seemed a little top-heavy, and There was some wish casting happening there with young players taking big strides and taking on more prominent roles. Winker and Suárez give them a lot more short-term stability offensively and take some pressure off those young outfielders that have been trying to break in.
If, because Winker's ADP is dropping precipitously as the projections change to more of a 270, 275 hitter from like a 300 hitter or a 290 hitter. As that happens, his ADP goes down. There might be a moment where it's smart to buy back in. The question I have is, where is that moment, and are the Mariners going to play him against lefties? I think maybe they will, because Kyle Lewis is not going to be ready for the season, it sounds like. He isn't expecting to be ready to start on opening day. When Lewis is up, I think there is at least a natural platoon there. I don't think that Lewis is relegated to platoon duty, but he'll DH and he can platoon in left field off of Winker if they think that's the best move. But the outfield is Winker, Kelenic, Haniger, and then the DH to open the season is Toro.
Yeah, I think they could still shuffle some things around, though. I mean, Lewis coming back eventually gives them one more quality bat to mix through those spots. And I guess the question would be, if Winker's not going to play against lefties, who's actually taking that playing time?
That's what I'm saying. Like, it might be Lewis when he's healthy, but if Lewis is not healthy to start.
Yeah, I think they're going to let Winker play against lefties. I'm more concerned about the park factors.
Well, then that
the reduced power ceiling.
also that dovetails with what you're saying, is that this is a better lineup, and if he's going to play every day, then the 77 runs and RBI totals are low.
Right. I think that's where the projections might be missing right now. So it's going to be a funny thing. How far does he fall? Does he fall 20 or 30 overall picks? Is that enough of a discount? Or are you still going to look at other players in that range and say, yeah, Jesse Winker's fine, but this other guy also steals some bases, or this other guy maybe brings more raw power to the table? Suárez, I think there was some bounce back potential that you highlighted on our third base preview a while back. A little harder to see it. Playing time doesn't seem like it's that much of a concern. I mean, Toro's versatile and can play all over, but I think they expect Suárez to be a 90% of the time starter, if not even an everyday straight up guy.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I think even the bat, which is pretty pessimistic about Winker because it stole a bunch of batting average from him. The bat says he's going to be 10 to 13% better with at the plate with the bat than league average, and be an asset defensively, which I think makes sense, which would make him an above average player, and has a better projection from the bat and the bat X than, let me make sure of this, Abraham Toro. That's kind of crazy. So Toro loses. I think Toro loses even more than Winker. Toro becomes the guy who gets moved around. Unless he makes Frazier the guy that moves around. That's a position battle. It's I guess an old school position battle too, not where I think there's going to be a winner and a loser between Frazier and Toro.
The other side of this, I think, is actually sort of interesting, because Mike Moustakas is not a redundancy anymore. Like it really never made sense for them to sign him a few off seasons ago when they did it, because they didn't have a clear place to play him. I know that was before the Jonathan India breakout, but Mike Moustakas at second base when you have Suárez at third and no universal DH back then, that was just weird.
Mm-hmm.
But Moustakas is the everyday third baseman now, so that path is cleared up. It looks like they're going to play Jake Fraley a lot, because they're clearly fixated on not spending money. So Fraley's at least a big side platoon guy.
Like I said this on the 3-0 show. Like, I think this is like, galaxy braining stuff where they're like, oh, everyone's gonna think we're selling off, but we're actually buying. Look, we bought Mike Minor and we bought Donovan Solano, and we're gonna be like the Rays, and we're gonna have players who can play everywhere, and we're gonna be cheaper and younger, and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, no, man, you're worse.
You're definitely
worse. You're cheaper and you're worse.
You're worse at a time when you weren't bad, and you're still not terrible, but you're going the wrong direction at a time when you easily could have justified going the other way. I don't know if this is a vote of confidence for the health of Nick Senzel, but being thinner in the outfield certainly makes him more important.
Can Fraley play center?
I think Fraley could probably play center. He's got speed in that
Yeah.
park too. Being a smaller park, I think that takes some of
All
the
the defensive
demands of the
numbers
position
are
off.
kind of short sample. Seattle did play him out there for 132 innings, but that was about a third of the playing time he got in the corners. And the depth charts put him in the corners. Interesting to put Senzel in center coming off of knee surgery. Maybe it'll just be Senzel in left and Fraley in center to begin to see how Senzel's doing. But that's some combination that's going on there. I think a big winner is Aristides Aquino and Tyler Naquin, who seem like they're starters, either at DH or in right field or both. You know, when I look at this depth chart, I still see too much playing time given to Kyle Farmer. I think Jose Barrero is going to take that job and be the starting shortstop from day one. So I think that's a little bit of an interesting thing going on there. I think I like Justin Dunn, Vlad Gutierrez, and Reaver San Martin, who are the 4, 5, and 6 starters there right now. But Hunter Green is coming for them. So Justin Dunn has 2 weeks to make his case almost.
I truly don't understand why they traded Amir Garrett for Mike Minor. Like, that is very, very strange. I mean, they let Wade Miley go to the Cubs on
Like
waivers
almost
early
same
on.
money.
Same money, slightly better projection. It just it seems unnecessary. But hey, do you, Reds? Do you? The other player that I think is winning in all of this, it's part of it's just the injury that we've talked about a little bit. Lucas Sims being possibly hurt right now does clear a path for Art Warren maybe to be the early season closer. So I just want to throw that out there again since everyone's chasing saves.
Well,
but I think you're right.
Sims says Saturday he's all clear regarding any potential arm trouble.
I know, but I just come on. Like,
what were you saying? You think I'm right? I'd like to hear that.
I think you're right about Barrero. I
yeah.
can't buy Kyle Farmer as an everyday shortstop. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Keith Law about this on the Athletic Baseball Show for Friday. The returns for players in general right now, if you're a team paring down payroll, it just seems like these teams are getting very little back. I know Brendan Williamson is an interesting pitching prospect, and maybe he's not that far away from contributing, but this seemed odd to me. So I want to know if there's something we're possibly missing with some of the prospects.
They would have gotten more for Winker if they hadn't put Suárez in. I mean,
and they could have got more for Suárez by just letting him play and possibly bouncing
recovering
back.
His value. Yeah,
that's the part that I just cannot get over that as more time passes. How about this? Anthony Rizzo back to the Yankees on a 2-year deal. Full season for him in that park as a left-handed hitter, a guy that doesn't strike out a lot. Do you actually like this fit, even though Yankee fans seem to be a little underwhelmed?
With Luke Voigt? Is it because he's a right-hander? What is wrong with Luke Voigt?
It's hurt a lot, I guess. But I like him. I think he should play more. But Rizzo's back, so how does this play out?
It's a great place. A great landing for Rizzo, I think. It wasn't like super obvious in the seasonal splits last year with the 200 plate appearances he played there. It's not like he got a big boost in power, but I have to think that longer term, given more chances to hit the ball over that short porch, this left-hander is going to do it. So I think it's a really good landing spot for him. I'm surprised that the projections haven't added more power than they have, but you can see that most of the projections are for better ISOs than he's had in 2020 and 2021. So there is going to be a park boost there. I kind of like, I think Steamers is actually attainable here. 257 with 29 homers and 6 stolen bases. That's going to make him a value where he's been drafted.
They are still a strange team just in terms of how they're constructed. We talked about that a bit on the 3-0 show. Little on the old side, but Rizzo brings that dynamic of not striking out a lot. I know there's...
Which Isaiah Falefa does too. Maybe that was something they wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, Freddie Freeman could have done that too, but 2 years for Rizzo versus 6 years for Freeman, there's a pretty big difference there, and the AAV is about 10 million difference as well.
Right.
So, if you're trying to do something else later, which the Yankees still could be, Carlos
I
Correa's
think there's
another still out there.
Yeah, there's another move out there, man. Because look, they're a full zero offensively at catcher. They're a below average offensive team at shortstop. And Isaiah Kiner-Falefa would be a Yankee utility guy, like a really, really good utility guy. And they might need that with Josh Donaldson on that team, and Aaron Judge on that team, and Aaron Hicks coming back from injury. I think Isaiah Kiner-Falefa as a guy you can move around would be so useful for this team. So I am still staring at shortstop, but maybe they think Peraza can come up and that Volpe is right behind him. So maybe this is just how the Yankees stay under the luxury tax again and still put a good team out there.
Maybe. And of course, the lingering question, we haven't talked about it on the pod yet, and it's not really worth getting into that much right now, is there's still some uncertainty about vaccination requirements and being able to play. We saw this in the NBA with Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn. Just we're waiting for a resolution on
Judge
that.
would be eligible to play 70 games this season because of the Toronto and New York rules about that.
Yeah. So things could change between now and opening day in
and
you're
you're seeing it societally, right? Like, all of the mask mandates are kind of falling away, and there's a lot of change happening week to week. My kids no longer have to wear masks at school for the first time, and we locally here have been among the most stringent lockdowns, mask mandates, all those things. So I have to feel like we're behind most of the rest of the country in that matter. So it is interesting to watch the mayor in New York try to squirm his way through this, and Kyrie Irving on the Nets is putting pressure on him publicly and showing up to games, maskless, unvaccinated as a fan to kind of prove his point. And so, there may be movement in the next couple of weeks even.
Yeah, just one of those things. I know people have been curious about it. I don't know. I get the sense the Yankees think they can push some sort of change if they're adding Rizzo and rostering players that are key parts of their lineup who would be unable to play if the rules don't change. So we'll see what happens. Eddie Rosario goes back to Atlanta. They're really doing a good job, like running it back with basically the same core they had. They added Colin McHugh to the bullpen as well.
Except Adam Duvall is the starting center fielder.
That's still pretty weird.
Eddie Rosario is a bad defensive outfielder. Marcell Ozuna is a bad defensive outfielder. Adam Duvall is gonna be a bad defensive center fielder. I'm sorry. I maybe there's some numbers that make me wrong, but it's a look. It's a thing. And they got Alex Dickerson right now at DH at the top of the DH depth chart. It's weird. It's weird to me a little bit.
I wonder if Drew Waters is going to get more playing time in the big leagues than we're expecting. Like if that's part of their plan. I mean, Pache is gone,
or Heredia,
but Waters wasn't that good at AAA last year. I mean, there were 28 steals. Yay, we like steals.
Arcia play center. This is a weird depth chart, man. It's weird for me.
You could have one hole there.
Arcia is listed as a backup in 5 positions.
But you're also banking on Acuna playing center field the way you're built right now.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Unless you add someone else later.
And I'm actually, so the Acuna thing is pretty interesting to me. I'm trying to read between the lines on all of this stuff. And they're saying Acuna's like, May 1st. But if you actually read some of the specifics, sometimes they say in the field. So
right.
I kind of feel like it's going to be Rosario, Duvall, Dickerson with Acuna at DH, and that may happen before May 1. He's walking without a limp. He's been playing. He's doing agility drills. Like I could see them, a couple weeks from now, he's in spring training games, and maybe he needs a week or 2 rehab stint, and late April he's back in the lineup. And if that's true, then I think, people docking him 3, 4, 5 rounds are going to be leaving money on the table.
Yeah. Outfield defense is going to be kind of brutal while they go through that and even after it, but
it's going to be brutal.
The playing time might be a little bit better than expected. With Rosario, I mean, yeah, clearly the success he had in the postseason is something to be excited about. And the projections, we talked about him, I think maybe a month or so ago on the outfield preview. The projections seem reasonable. I think the playing time might actually come up a bit lighter than we're accustomed to. If you look at what he did from 2017 to 2019 in Minnesota, when he was just under 600 plate appearances every year, he was really, I think, a good accumulator. at that time. And I wonder if that's going to start to tail off just a little bit, being on a team that has aspirations to repeat as World Series champions.
The one thing that is good for him, even as bad as Rosario is with the glove, I kind of think that he's going to be better than Marcell Ozuna, Alex Dickerson.
That's the bar he has to clear.
That's the bar he has to clear to be out there. And if he can clear that, and I think he can, then he's the guy who's going to play. Dickerson's going to be a real backup. I'm sorry that I put Dickerson in right field. I was saying Rosario, Duvall, Ozuna, with Dickerson at DH till Acuna comes back. Acuna at DH when he comes back for a couple weeks, and then Acuna starts filtering into the field and pushing Ozuna, I think, to DH. That's good news for Ozuna, having outfield eligibility for the next season.
Yeah, it does help him retain that, given some of the limitations on the other corners of their roster. Jock Peterson to the Giants, that's just going to look weird from a uniform perspective. I think it's a good fit just in terms of the success they've had with hitters, but as a left-handed hitter especially, not the best fit park-wise, even though they've had some success turning a lot of guys around the last 2 seasons.
I mean, it looks like it's going to be the full platoon situation again. There where they've got I think a platoon at Peterson and Ruff at DH. I would say there's probably a platoon at La Stella Flores at second. Although La Stella, I saw him hitting a drive line, so I'm a little surprised that the news is he's behind from his Achilles comeback. But maybe hitting is possible and the field isn't. So, but even then, I think you could do a what's the other platoon you could do? Flores and Tyro Estrada and Dubon are all righties, so that's not a platoon. In the outfield, Wade and Slater.
I guess you're probably sharing a spot with Peterson and Austin Slater.
Yeah, Peterson and Slater. Crawford might be in a platoon with Tyro Estrada if Estrada makes it. They were already sitting Crawford against lefties.
Yeah, Darren Ruff probably sharing a spot with Lamont Wade Jr. If I had to sort of pair him with someone.
I can't believe this team won so many games last year. And I kind of think that they're going to win more games than people think too, just because they have this super interchangeable, super weird roster. But it's the most amazing thing is that this team scored so many runs, I think.
I still can't fully unpack how they did it. And if they do it again without Buster Posey and with the roster as it's currently constructed, I think I'll be almost as surprised as I was by what they did in 2021. Can't be quite that surprised because
we'd be doing it again, but still.
I mean, yeah, like I've seen it once, so it's not totally implausible. Andrew McCutchen goes to the Brewers based on the comments made by David Stearns. They expect him to be the primary DH. I think the clear loser in this case is probably Keston Hiura. If you start thinking about all the playing time, they're playing him a little bit in the outfield this spring. I don't really know if that's going to open up a path to playing time for Hiura. I almost wonder if there's another trade coming for the Brewers. Like if they might have something up their sleeve between now and opening day.
Yeah, what would you trade for if you were them? Would you trade for a pitcher to push Hauser or Lauer to 6th, a starting pitcher? What would you trade for? It kind of fits right now pretty well with Hiura on the outside. Unfortunately, you know what I mean? Like you have players everywhere. You have Tyrod Taylor as the primary backup at all 3 outfield positions, and McCutchen can play there in a pinch. And you have Urias backing up, the middle infield and playing third, and then Brousseau backing him up there probably. So I don't know.
Go get Joey Votto. That's what they should do.
Trade Rowdy and Hiura for Votto.
Something like that.
Yeah, that'd be kind of crazy. I like something like that if they can afford it.
Yeah, I'd have fun with something like that. I mean, it's not good for Hiura. I liked him as a late dart prior to this move. I think McCutchen is obviously good enough to hold a large share of that playing time, and not necessarily a guy that's going to play in center field. If something happens to Lorenzo Cain, I think a lot of that playing time still goes to Tyrone Taylor, but he gets a little bit of a ding as a result of McCutchen being there too, because they can't float the DH quite as often, having someone who's sort of dedicated toward that spot now on the roster.
Yeah, that's true. But McCutchen is not so far gone that he can't play the outfield. I mean, they can still call him the primary DH and play him on the outfield sometimes.
Unless they think they can jam Hunter Renfroe in center field or something like that in the event of a cane injury. I hope they're not planning on doing that. They did it with Avi Garcia, though, so maybe they'll do it again with his replacement.
He's a little bit better defensively than you might expect.
Big arm. Corey Dickerson to the Cardinals. Not good news for Lars Nootbaar, as we were tweeting before the show.
Gosh. I'm hoping that Nootbaar is on his way for a pitcher to Oakland. Just a hope, not a source thing. But he's totally the type that would fit in Oakland. A guy who's ready to play in the big leagues, and maybe extra for this Cardinals team now that they've got Yepes, Nootbaar, and Gorman knocking on the door, and they said they would only bring them up if there was regular ABs for them. And right now with Dickerson, you go O'Neill, Bader, Carlson, Dickerson at DH, Edman at second, and you don't have ABs for any of those guys.
Yeah, I think what we had previously was maybe Paul DeYoung getting a lot of DH playing time and Edmundo Sosa being more of a glove first sort of shortstop. Now that looks like a true position battle in all this. And Nootbaar, I think, gets cast into a typical fourth outfielder role for the time being.
I think DeYoung wins, dude. I think DeYoung wins.
They've actually bounce back potential there.
They've said something too. Maybe it's on his page.
But I think they are a great fit for a trade with Oakland right now because Jack Flaherty is getting a second opinion on his shoulder. I'm very worried about Flaherty. I think it's as much of a player as much as a player who has some uncertainty on him can be undraftable for me at this point. Flaherty has become undraftable until we know more about what's going on with his arm.
And I don't like, you're like, look at Dakota Hudson's line and you're like, oh my gosh, 249 major league innings, 3.14 ERA. Like, this is a good pitcher, but I don't think he is.
No, I think they would look a lot better with Frankie Montas or Sean Manaea there. And I think they see themselves as legit contenders in the NL Central. They should. Somebody has to compete with the Brewers, and maybe the Cubs are in the mix there too. Clearly the Reds didn't want that responsibility based on how they've gone about things. But Flaherty, not the only injury to be worried about right now. Chris Sale has a stress fracture in his ribs.
We're going to the injuries portion of the rundown.
We're gonna just get through it. We're gonna find a way. Sale's gonna open the year on the IL.
Yeah,
I had no argument against Sale this draft season. I just had that internal, in the moment sort of thing when he would come up, we'd get to that fourth round range where he'd like to go, and I'd say I'm gonna do something else. And I didn't have a clear reason why. I just didn't want to draft him, not because I thought this was going to happen or anything like that. I'm not saying I was afraid of injury risk. I just couldn't follow through on Chris Sale, and now a stress fracture in the rib cage. I mean, how long do you think we're looking at before he's actually pitching in games again?
I don't know. It always has to do with the particulars of how much of a gap there is and how much of a fracture there is, and and bone sometimes actually heals worse than ligaments because it's harder to get blood to the area. So it just depends on how bad of a fracture it is. My guess would be he misses 2 to 4 weeks.
So that maybe gets him back in.
He could still get
late April.
He could still maybe get 25 starts or something. 20 starts, 25 starts. I'm a little bit agreeing with you because I had Sale and Verlander on my planning sheet for AL Labor as my ace, and then both of them went into the low 20s, and around 21 I was like, yo, I'm out. So ended up with Berrios.
Yeah, previously I had Sale as my 15th ranked starting pitcher. If we're going to say he's going to miss a month right now and he's back late April, early May, if 25 starts is a kind of a cap on what he can do, that bumps him down probably to where Zach Gallen and Lance McCullers used to be, like around 40th among starting pitchers for me. Those guys both probably are coming down based on news that we've since learned about where they're at too. But
Chris
think
Sale or
Sale has to
Clayton
slide.
Kershaw all the way down to like 48, where I have Kershaw,
I think I would take Kershaw over Sale at this point.
because the news is at least better on him.
But that's probably about right in terms of innings expectations. Like you have the injury that you already know about versus
Well, that's
the
you
lingering
tease some
one.
other news. Zach Gallen, shoulder bursitis.
Yeah, he had that earlier in the offseason, and he threw from a mound on Tuesday. This is the hardest thing about parsing
Yes.
injury news right now is this was a problem. It might not be a problem anymore. Here's what he's doing right now. How much do you care about the thing that he may have recovered from and had previously?
I did make a joke like all these people were coming back and be like, "Oh, by the way, I had surgery."
Yeah, right. Yeah, I threw you the clip from Tommy Boy when Tommy's walking through the factory with his dad and some of the business partners, and he asked one of the guys how he's doing, and the guy said, "I had a kidney removed last April, but I still have the other one." It's just like, oh, that's everybody reporting to spring training right now. Yikes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm actually downgrading Gallen a lot right now because he's throwing from a mound already. He's doing the thing that's pretty close to being on
I think
schedule.
I have Gallen ahead of Kershaw and Sale.
He's at least in the same cluster.
Yeah.
The specific order for me to be determined based on further updates on Zach Gallen. Some good news on the pitching front. Actually, two items of good news. Jacob deGrom in line for opening day, April 7th in Washington. I saw Britt tweeting from Mets camp on Thursday morning, and the reactions that Mets hitters were giving deGrom seemed very encouraging. It was a lot of wows as they walked back to the dugout. So
where you have deGrom now?
At this point, creeping up, Jacob deGrom was, where was Dick? He was sitting just outside the top 5. He was at 8 previously. I think I'm flipping him with Zach Wheeler, who was previously 6th, or at least moving him ahead of Wheeler, who also, as we learned earlier this week, was dealing with some shoulder stuff earlier in the offseason. And his availability, also because of an illness, is now up in the air for opening day. So Burns, Cole, Woodruff, Scherzer, Buehler, deGrom is my current top 6 among pitchers. And deGrom has that up arrow kind of nudging him up to the point where we get to a point 2 weekends from now. If deGrom's still just cruising through spring, he's healthy, the velo's there, the life's there on all of his pitches, I think he could probably top out as my 3rd ranked pitcher. There's still elevated underlying concern, but
I've got him 4. That's where I had my last one.
I could see him finishing
Woodruff
as a late
just seems
rounder.
like such a horse, dude. And his injury projections are better.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to move him against a horse.
Fair enough, but I do think that people who play a lot of NFBC leagues have been putting this out there for a while, that they see a scenario in which Jacob deGrom goes late first round once the main event weekend gets here, and he's putting the foundation in place to make that a reality based on how spring training has started for him. How about this one? Mike Clevenger expects to be ready for the start of the season. Is he creeping
but does
up
he
for you?
expect to be ready for the rest of the season? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Arm health jokes are not fair.
That's mean. No, it's it's just. I mean, I think that there is risk beyond just coming back from this. You know, he's been a fairly injured pitcher,
mm-hmm.
and it's not always the arm. Like it's been other things.
I've had him slightly ahead of ADP and have drafted him 0 times so far this draft season, and in about 6 opportunities to do so. I think he fits in with the good injured pitchers cluster, even with the good news. I think he's kind of in the Gallen, Kershaw, Sale bucket for now, because we're looking at good ratios, good strikeout rates over a reduced number of innings. They have to be careful with his workload. They can't break him in the return. So good news, encouraging news. Maybe it makes me more likely to take him where he goes, but if he jumps up 3 or 4 rounds from where he was going, I'm probably still out because I'm just a tick below where the field seems to be on Clevenger.
Yeah, I'm currently looking at him in my ranks. I think I have him around 60th. 60. No, it looks like 65th. He's still draftable, but there's so many more healthy people ahead of him.
I'm a lot more confident in Luis Severino by comparison. And I think if the ADP ends up leveling out, it's an easy choice for me to take Severino. And even at the earlier price, I like Severino better.
Oh, that's funny. I have Severino 2 spots ahead of him.
I'm more like 10 spots ahead. Severino's my injured pitcher who showed us a little bit at the end of last season. I guess Verlander's also in this. Verlander's up in his own stratosphere. But if you said pick 2, Verlander and Severino are the injured in 2021 pitchers that I really like as good, healthy pitchers in 2022.
Yeah, I can see that.
Other injury news to pass along. Griffin Canning opening the season on the 60-day IL. Mike Soroka doing that as well. I think Canning opening on that long-term IL is a little more of a surprise, relatively speaking. Soroka, maybe we get him back at some point mid-season.
Yeah, it was called a setback for Canning. So
yeah, I'm not feeling real good about that. Rhys Hoskins looks like he's on track for the start of spring training games. Just good news there since he was coming back from, I believe it was a core muscle surgery for Hoskins. So he seems to be healthy at this point.
Abdominable
snowman, Rhys Hoskins.
Abdominal surgery. Good one, Eno. Well done.
Brendan McKay is in Rays camp and fully healthy. Kind of a guy I'd forgotten about just because it's been such a meandering road for him to get healthy.
Yeah, I've got an injury update or just an update from Rays camp that was texted to me by a friend of the podcast, Jason Collette. The Rays, Kevin Cash was impressed by the live batting practice of Luis Patino, Ryan Yarbrough, and Jalen Beeks, and said Yarbrough's velocity was up. Those things actually matter in tandem with McKay because Yarbrough is maybe the softest spot in that rotation. And even ahead of McKay, you still, and outside of the top 5, you still have Yonny Chirinos and Luis Patino, if not Josh Fleming. So maybe McKay can leapfrog Fleming and become the 8th starting pitcher on the squad, which means he will get maybe 50 to 75 innings this year.
Yeah, I would say McKay probably healthier than Yonny Chirinos today, too. So maybe that gives him a little bit of a leg up. The underlying numbers were better than the results from McKay in that debut back in 2019. 56 to 16 K to walk in 49 innings, but a 5.14 ERA and a 1.41 whip. Really good numbers from him in the minors. I just think they have to look at him as a guy that's probably more of a glue guy, up and down, can do a lot of different things, but over under 80 innings this season at the big league level for Brendan McKay. I mean, is that a reasonable place to put a line like that?
Yeah, and I take the under.
Yeah, so I think he's more of a in-season waiver pickup if the situation breaks the right way, rather than someone you're drafting and stashing for the time when he has that opportunity. Trevor Larnach is healthy again. Some good news there out of Twins camp. I meant to lump this in with the other Cardinals issues, but Alex Reyes had an injection due to soreness in his shoulder. And on top of that, the Cardinals revealed they might opt for a committee approach to saves this season. So, Giovanni Gallegos, good pitcher who is rosterable regardless, just getting expensive in snake drafts. That's what makes it a little bit tricky to pay the premium for him, is this uncertainty about just how this committee might actually work.
Yeah, I think it's Gallegos. I don't know why. I'm sorry. I just think it's Gallegos. I mean, Hicks can't hit couldn't hit the side of the barn in the AFL. Reyes is hurt. And Genesis Cabrera is good, but I don't think he needs to take that job from Gallegos.
Yeah, I just think it comes down to how much they want to be like a Tampa Bay or a Seattle, because they certainly could take that approach, or a Minnesota.
They have the Cardinals way, dude.
I think they're rewriting that. I think they're adding chapters to the book and re-releasing it. Because that's what you do, I think, when you write a book. I've never written one. I have no idea how to write a book. Jake Myers will open the season on the IL for the Astros. He's working back from a shoulder injury, so they have some playing time available in center field. A whole cast of players: Jose Siri, Lewis Brinson, who we mentioned is a minor move. Bunch of guys competing for that playing time. Some minor moves, other additions. How about Matthew Boyd for the Giants? Obviously not going to pitch anytime soon because he's
homer problem guy in that park.
Yeah. Like, once he comes back, I'm pretty excited about Matthew Boyd.
Yeah, I wonder. I think it, we talked about this a little bit on the 3-0 show that, what replaces the option a guy a million times will be the IL game or more of the IL game. And it's pretty obvious to see with Matthew Boyd and Carlos Martinez on the team that there's going to be a lot of IL movement on that pitching staff.
Yes, they have already, I think, committed themselves to using the IL as a way of having an expanded roster. That is,
they've projected their IL moves.
it's there. It is right out there for everyone to see. I mentioned Mike Minor to the Reds earlier. I think he's mostly an NL only league sort of guy. Hard to stream him in that park, given some of the past issues he's had with home runs, and given the way Great American Ballpark boosts those home runs. Cubs certainly have a type. They added Steven Brault to the mix at the back of their rotation. Roman Quinn ended up in Miami. Maybe some cheap speed there, always if he finds playing time, but just a long road, kind of more of a bench guy at this point. I think it's pretty clear that's really all he's going to bring to the table. The Dodgers may use a bullpen committee. This came up, I think, with a Blake Trinan note that I saw posted by RotoWire. It makes sense because they have plenty of relievers. I think the funny response to my tweets about that were, who's getting within 3 runs of the Dodgers? Like, how many save situations are they going to have?
That's not bad.
Fair point.
I see Trinan as just clearly, I mean, as much as I like Daniel Hudson and Phil Bickford and Bruce Dog Adderall, like Trinan is, in particular for Bruce Dog Adderall, is just like in the superior version to Bruce Dog Adderall. Like, they're very similar, and Trinan is better. Gratterall shows the ball and doesn't have the same breaking ball that Trinan does. Hudson and Bickford are slightly different. They're more sort of four-seam north-south than Trinan. But the only thing I could see is sometimes bringing in Vesia against lefties. That's about all I got. To me, I don't know what that update is about. I think Trinan is a closer unless they sign Jansen.
I feel the way about Blake Trinan that you feel about Giovanni Gallegos, and I think Trinan goes a little bit later in drafts too. So I'm more comfortable with the idea of missing.
Who's going to actually take that job from him?
Right. And look, committees are not the worst thing in the world if it ends up being what the Giants did last year. If someone gets 30 saves and the other person gets 10 and someone else gets 5, then fine. 30 saves is fine. We're happy with that. Speaking of save situations, some uncertainty now about the role of Tyler Wells. Might be used in a multi-inning role. So the hope that he was going to be the closer might be dashed because they think they can get more innings out of him. That means Cole Sulser and Tanner Scott, some other guys could emerge to be the primary source.
My favorite is there. Scott. The dark horse is Dylan Tate, who added. Well, actually, that's interesting. He's up to 95, 96 at Driveline. The bigger deal would be if he changed some shapes on his pitches because he's a bit of a ground ball guy, and that's not exactly what you want on your closer. So I think he's a bit of a dark horse. People mention Jorge Lopez. It's just awful command and some really bad health moments last year where it looked like he was pitching hurt while we were watching him. So to me, it's Tanner Scott if it's not Tyler Wells.
Yeah, Scott and Dylan Tate are the two that I'm more interested in of their options. I'm just not a Cole Sulser guy. I feel really bad about that. Colin McHugh won the award that I thought he was going to win. The guy who could close somewhere but won't close somewhere award. He goes to Atlanta. Trevor May was the
because I think Will Smith can lose that job, but you still got Tyler Matzek and AJ Minter throwing straight flames ahead of Colin McHugh, probably.
Yeah, so nice addition for Atlanta, but not quite the landing spot we were hoping for as maybe people that believe that McHugh could get some saves somewhere. It seems like it's going to be a little harder for that to happen. Other relievers that signed, how about David Robertson and Daniel Norris to the Cubs, Dan Winkler and Greg Holland to the Rangers, and Tyler Thornburg also going to Atlanta, at least with the Cubs and Rangers. Those are pretty unsettled situations. I think Rowan Wick is still the internal favorite to open the year with that job, but David Robertson, even though he's old, he could be the old Renaissance reliever that comes out and finds saves this year. I actually think that could be a sneaky deep league last pick sort of dart to throw.
We got some breaking news.
Yes.
At the end here.
You're so tired you're not even doing the riff.
Sorry.
It's only Thursday. He's so done. So bad.
Brad Miller, 2-year deal. I think that means he's the third baseman. The glove has been bad for a while, and he seemed like a DH. Maybe they will do an offensive defensive platoon with Brad Miller and Andy Ibanez and call it a day on this offseason for them.
Yeah, that could definitely be curtains.
It's a
for
lot
their
better.
offseason.
It's a lot better.
You got to feel a lot better as a Rangers fan today than you did this time last year. I mean, what a gross situation. Oh, I forgot to add this one to the rundown, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Not a minor move. Zach Greinke going to Kansas City. We were wondering, where does he go?
Yeah.
What does his outlook appear to be? It's
we
a
did
good
talk
division.
we did talk about the fact that his really kind of a 1 year jump into the low swinging strike, low strikeout pool. Was it an indicator of age, or the fact that he mentioned to me that he was expected to be the innings horse for the Astros, and he was trying to get out of innings as quickly as possible. So I don't know how that ports over to his new team. Would he be expected to be the innings horse there? Maybe,
I wouldn't believe that quote from anyone else. Like, if anybody else said that, like, let's just cover. But Greinke, why would he lie about that?
Yeah,
His incentive could be dishonest in that.
It
in that
did not
instance
come
is
off that
minimal.
way. Yeah.
No, like I think that was actually what he was doing.
There's also an interesting piece of rumor that is relevant to this. They're supposedly one of the finalists for Montas. So I don't know. Your appraisal of this team could start to shift a little. If it goes Greinke, Montas, Hernandez, 1, 2, 3, and you're hoping that Lynch jumps up, or one of their minor leaguers jumps up into that group. Now you're like, well, that starting pitching group is a little bit better. Lever group is all right, and they've got the position prospects that could break out at any time. So maybe they're moving towards something good there.
Montas, Greinke, Montas, and then Hernandez was your third. I like that.
Yeah. I mean,
like
that's a lot better top three than they've had for a while.
Bullpen kind of sneakily getting better too. I mean, we saw Scott Barlow pitch well again last year.
We like Stelmont and Coleman.
Yeah, Coleman could be filthy. A little extra depth there. Garrett gives them another lefty that can be good. So I quietly like what the Royals are doing. They're at least putting in the effort, and they've got that young group of prospects coming up to help round out that roster as
Only
well.
projected for 75 wins. Maybe smash that over.
Andrew Chafin to the Tigers. Is he their closer? Like, I know they named Gregory Soto the closer. Soto's the guy for now. Who gets more saves this season, Soto or Chafin?
Stuff says Soto.
But Chafin showed up for his introductory press conference with a mug root beer and camo Crocs.
I know he's a classic dude, but I mean he's humping it up there at 92. I think people like that. There is research that backs it, that they like more velo, and they even said something about Soto being the closer. So
yeah, still not expecting that to hold up, but I think we've done it. I think we made it through another robust rundown, and
time for a nap.
3 hours worth of topics crammed into about 75 minutes. That is our specialty. I am going to try and find a corned beef and cabbage recipe. If I can't find one, we'll make shepherd's pie.
I'm gonna add 1,000 words to my 5,000 word manifesto to try and make it these 7 days after the lockout. Quick analysis on every deal. You can find that on The Athletic.
Get in for $1 a month for the first 6 months at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Really appreciate everybody who supports us by subscribing or by leaving us a review and making sure that they subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just go there, hit the subscribe button. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit the like button on this video. And as always, leave us questions either there underneath the video or send us an email, ratesandbarrels@theathletic.com. We'll have more time for some questions now that we've moved through the catch up on the news and the position previews. Hopefully we can help a few people out as draft season really kind of ramps up here. We got Tout Wars weekend coming up this weekend, and NFBC main events, I believe, are now just a week away, like 10 days away or less. So all of that.
Battle me in a RotoWire online championship on NFBC on Friday. I'm signed up. I shouldn't do this. You guys all know my rankings and everything, but Friday at, I think, 2 p.m. Eastern. It sort of collapses if you don't get enough people, so it might end up being 4 p.m. or whatever. So
Oh yeah.
You gotta watch it. I haven't checked yet today to see how many people are in it, but Friday afternoon, if you want to battle me in a RotoWire OC, please don't. If you're very good, join my main that I have now signed up for next Thursday.
I like how you still put it out there anyway. Still told people this is when I'm playing. If you're better than me, please don't sign up for my league. So that way, anyone better than you is like, well, I'm definitely getting in there. Better expected value. Why would I not? I have not set my date yet. I'm going to play in the auction championship this year. I can't swing both the main event and the auction championship. I'm not bankrolled quite like that. Someday
I just had more practice. I've had more practice doing snakes on that platform. So I'm gonna try out the main.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the little auction online first to get more comfortable with the NFBC's auction room. So if I choose a date for the first one, especially, I'll be sure to throw a link out there for anybody who wants to play against me in an auction format. Should be a lot of fun. But that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Monday.